Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Pod and the Pendulum, the show covering horror movie franchises, one movie and one episode at a time. As always, I'm your host, Mike Snoonian, and we are going to be we're continuing our drive through the mausoleums and ghost towns of the country as we discuss 1994's direct-to-video Phantasm III. And I'm not alone. I've got a pair of co-hosts with me today. We have one of our regulars with us here from Dread Central, Daily Grindhouse, Rue Morgue, as well as a frequent contributor to the Losers Club. We have Rachel Reeves. Rachel, how are we?
Hey, I am great. This is such a great way to start my morning. I'm just so excited to be here with you all.
Excellent. So no regrets picking this one. No regrets picking Phantasm.
Oh, God,
Excellent.
No. I am just having an absolute blast.
Great. Because this is a first-time watch for both of us, right? Like, we are both kind of
Yep.
We are Phantasm noobs, as it is. So we're both diving into this one headlong. A little bit scared, but we have someone to guide us here on our journey. We have our own little Reggie Bannister. Shouldn't say little, right? That's not fair. And also, you're not bald. So I know that. All right, I am going to just introduce you now rather than continue to put my foot in my mouth.
No, please continue to compare me to Reggie. That's great.
You may have had a ponytail at one point. I don't know. But we have joining us from Ghouls Magazine, and you can also find her work over at Certified for Gut, Hear a Scream, and the Moving Pictures Film Club. Let's welcome Ariel Powers-Schaub to the show. Ariel, how are we?
I'm so great. Thanks for having me. I can't wait to discuss this super fun movie with you both.
It is... We are super glad to have you back because you were awesome on our Phantasm show, and I think you're going to hopefully explain some things to us, too.
I don't know about all that. We'll see.
But let's start with some initial thoughts right now. And Ariel, why don't you kick things off? Because when we were talking Phantasm, you're like, hey, I'd love to come back for 3 and 5. So what were your initial impressions of this, and how does it feel when you'll rewatch it?
Yeah. So I think, as I mentioned on the first episode, I watched all the Phantasm movies for the first time, like right in a row. So within like the back-to-back setup of it works for me. But the reason I really especially like Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead, I mean, number one, we get Mike back, which is fun. And we kind of get Mike back. We'll talk about it. But I really like the characters in this one. It sort of goes back to its roots with like building on the weird lore. It allows itself to be dreamlike again. And while the second movie is like a really fun action movie, it really just has a different vibe. You know, it's kind of the outlier. It's still worth watching. It's still an important part of like Reggie's journey for sure. And I guess technically Mike's journey, but it doesn't really feel like Mike's journey. Anyway, so I like Phantasm 3.
Not a fan of James the Grow is what you're saying. Like,
it's not his fault, you know? He's just not Michael. But yeah, Phantasm 3 is just a ton of fun, and I love Rocky, and I like Tim, and it just really makes me feel like we're back in the tall man's world.
I mean, just one word comes to mind for me, which is just joy. And like, I'm just so grateful to be on this journey with you all because I'm just having so much fun. I literally watched it right before this recording. So I'm just, excuse me if it's like a little excessive, but I'm like on a Phantasm high. Let me just tell you.
Be excessive today because as we've already, and listeners won't know this through the powers of editing, but I can't speak today. So...
It was like great. I mean, it's like we're recording this on a Saturday. It's like Saturday morning, and it really like gave me that feeling of being a kid and like waking up and like, all right, I'm gonna eat like cereal and watch cartoons and just like, yay, Saturday, I don't have school. And this kind of has that feeling for me. Like this was just so silly and fun. And I kind of went in with pretty low expectations because I knew it was, you know, a direct-to-video kind of thing. And I knew Michael was back. So it's like, I haven't seen the rest of these. So I wasn't sure how I would respond to that. But I thought, I mean, it was a lot better than I anticipated. Definitely have some questions. But I also really appreciate some of the developments that they kind of unfolded here in this one. So, yeah, very excited to talk about it with you guys.
Yeah. I really enjoyed it. It was the first time watch for me as well. I tossed it on, I think, immediately after we recorded Phantasm II. Like, after recording that, I just wanted to get started on the third one and, like, really dug it. Like, I thought it was a lot of fun. It definitely has that early 90s, like, straight-to-video feel that a lot of horror movies have, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it was definitely, like you said, Rachel, like that kind of Saturday morning, no chores, I don't have to go to school today feel. For me, it was like that kind of like Friday night, grab something at the video store that you've never seen before and like get together with the boys, eat pizza, and watch horror movies feel. Like a lot of fun to it. And when I was thinking, like when watching it, because I love kind of putting horror movies in like the context of their time, like what is around. And this is probably one of the more fallow periods when it comes to horror. Like obviously the bigger franchises of the 80s had either wrapped up or were kind of like fumbling around a bit. There hadn't really been anything to really take its place. And it's kind of incredible like watching this and then knowing that like 2 years later, like Scream is going to come out at the end of the year and completely change the game and revitalize the genre. Like, because it feels like those two movies are years apart, but it's only a mere 2 years between them.
Yeah, that's wild when you put it in that context. Like, it feels a little late. To me, it feels like some of the, you know, slightly later Friday the 13th kind of films a little bit. Or like those middle ones. So yeah, putting it like snuggled up next to Scream, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Yep. I don't know, weird.
We did on Psychoanalysis, we did Thinner as a show. It blew my mind. I did not realize they had come out the same year as one another, because that is like, you gotta be kidding me, like how much had changed just in the span of a few, or was going to change in like a few short months. I always find that kind of fascinating. Just like with 80s horror, there's definitely like 84 seems like when there's a shift, and that's when like horror from the 1980s becomes 80s horror as opposed to what the 70s felt like. So I'll talk briefly about the background here of this movie, and then we'll kind of dive into our thoughts and feelings on it itself. In June of 1992 at the Fangoria Weekend of Horrors convention, Reggie Bannister, like they're doing a Phantasm panel, and they're trading stories about the first two movies, how they were made, behind the scenes stuff, just having a fun time with fans. And when one of the audience members asks during the Q&A, will we ever see a third movie, Reggie Bannister spills the beans. He's like, yep, there's a third movie that's coming, and oh, by the way, like Michael Baldwin is going to come back as Michael as well. Like, and that was unknown at the time that Coscarelli had been negotiating with Baldwin, trying to get him to come back. And the other big surprise was Bill Thornberry was going to come back as Jody after his character was completely left out of the second movie. And what's kind of like interesting to note is like Thornberry and Baldwin, they had left acting after Phantasm. Like neither of them were working actors. Like Bannister, after Phantasm II, had taken on a few different projects, so he was a working actor. But, you know, Baldwin and Thornberry had spent like the intervening like 15 years. Like Thornberry was in Nashville as a working musician with his band, and I think doing like studio sessions. So it was kind of like interesting to see them come back after so long, and it definitely shocked audiences. New Line Cinema, after picking up the rights to Jason Voorhees, if not the Friday the 13th name, they had a deal in place to partially fund parts 3 and parts 4 of Phantasm. They had a deal in front of Coscarelli to sign. He had a 40-page treatment on Coscarelli that he had written after part 2. There was a really interesting note in it that the roles would be reversed. Like, Reggie would be the one kidnapped after part 2, and Michael would go on a quest to save him, and he would be accompanied by a monkey companion and a love interest, which,
oh my God,
when I read this, I read it too quickly, and I read it as the monkey companion as a love interest, and I was like, what sort of shit is Don Coscarelli into? I feel a little bit robbed of not having a Phantasm where there's a little chimpanzee like Smokey and the Bandit, or Any Which Way But Loose, like one of those 70s kind of,
like Phenomena. Like,
give it to me. So if there's ever I want a reboot of Phantasm now with just monkey companions. Everybody has a monkey companion.
oh God.
In some alternate universe, that movie does exist.
Oh, I want to be in that universe. Other notes from it, there was a witch's coven and an industrial mausoleum that churned out hundreds of bodies a day for the tall man. I think all those things became victims of like the budget being much smaller. Coscarelli brought back Kristen Dean to help out. She had been a fan of the first film, and she had been one of the Phantasm fans. I think they would behind the scenes call them like either fans or like exaggerate fanstasm when they were referred to as part of the crew. But she had been like a really strong presence in the second movie. Like, she had the unofficial title of hearse wrangling, but she was a huge help with the storyboards, and she was a unit producer. So Coscarelli found her input like very valuable. She was also kind of the continuity expert, much like Daniel Farlands, who wrote Halloween 6, The Curse of Michael Myers. He came to the project with basically a huge binder of notes, like detailing all the continuity, and she kind of had that unofficial role as well. So he sends her, Coscarelli, that is, sends her the script, and she returns it back to him with about 35 pages of notes, saying, like, here are some kind of continuity errors between the first two movies and this one that we need to clean up. Here are some things that, you know, might strengthen it. I think she's the one that adds the liquid nitrogen in terms of, like, how do we freeze the tall man? Like, why don't we use liquid nitrogen to do so? So, you know, she is brought back on, and a lot of the improvements or suggestions that she made, like, he would go on to use in the final picture. According to Angus Scrimm's journal, although the picture was supposed to go to New Line, MCA Universal president Robert Blattner offered a substantially better deal for Part 3 than New Line did, so which makes me wonder how low Bob Shaye's offer was, because this is not a big budget movie. So they secured the distribution rights. Sadly, Blattner would actually die in a plane crash before the filming of this movie. And it actually was put on hold for a little bit. Like, all of Blattner's projects were put on hold until they were re-greenlit. So there was some question as to whether this would actually occur. But I just have some notes, like getting the band back together. Obviously, there's the casting familiarity with Baldwin, Bannister, and Thornberry all returning. Robert Quesada, who had served on the first two movies, comes back as a unit production manager. Mark Sjostrom returns after heading the effects of Part 2. And he spoke pretty openly, like, not in a negative way, just in a really practical way of, like, how when he worked on the Elm Street movies, every movie had a bigger budget, so there was more he could do. He had a bigger sandbox to play with, and this was not the case here. I think it's fair to say that the majority of the budget went to the special effects, but he had a lot less to work with, so it kind of, to me, is like there's the up and down nature of the effects in this one.
Did you find, like, what the budget was?
I didn't. It's probably not that hard to look up.
Because the first one was, like, wasn't crazy either.
It wasn't. It was like the first one was, I think $300,000, but it's also not a super like budget, like $2.5 million. So it's, compared to over $3 million they got for so you're cutting that by 1/6. So it's not no money,
Right.
but it's still for like Don Coscarelli's vision versus like what he actually gets. Like in his mind, this is probably a $20 million movie. Like everything he does, he's like, so we need 2 cars to explode. We need,
At least
like it's not a Coscarelli picture unless two cars explode. But it's a substantial. When you only have $3 million, cutting $500,000 is a pretty big. It's a pretty big cut. And the first one's not super effects driven. It's more like mood and atmosphere. So
Totally.
yeah. But that one, every single penny, like they also had as much time to shoot it as they want. They did it over the course of a year or two. So, who's not brought back? Steve Patino. We mentioned him in part 2. He was on the record of like bad-mouthing Coscarelli and everybody else after part 2 didn't do well. He kind of felt like his contributions were minimized. He went uncredited for a lot of his work. So he was, on one hand, blasting everyone behind Phantasm II in the horror press, but he was also openly jockeying for a return, but he was not asked back. He kind of burned those bridges. Kelly Pryor of DreamQuest Images is brought on to replace him to create the sphere effects in part 3, which there are a lot of them. A bit of a tougher shoot this time around. Like that's just the only note I have there in that just a little bit less money and a lot of different sets and a lot of different locations made it a bit of a challenging shoot, although there was a lot of like camaraderie behind the script scenes. And like the universal note I have is everybody speaks highly of Angus Scrimm being the nicest, most pleasant dude behind the scenes, like just the complete opposite of his character. There was actually a drive-by shooting at the cemetery they were filming in. Like they had persons drive by yelling at them like, we have family buried here. And then Uzis went off like shortly thereafter. So a bit scary.
Yeah.
Uzis?
Yes, Uzis or some sort
That's
of.
extreme.
So what's that?
That's extreme.
Yeah. It's, North Hollywood in the 90s, so it's kind of in the middle of, that was a thing. That was definitely a thing. It was the culture of its day. All right, so the movie is filmed, it's edited, and it gets some test screenings that are very encouraging, but MCA Universal have no idea what to do with the movie. They don't really know how to market it. They don't have, there's no big stars behind it. It's the third movie in a series that isn't quite like a name brand, like a Friday the 13th or an Elm Street. So it ends up like sitting on the shelf for a year. And it finally, around Halloween of 1994, gets like a super limited theatrical run, and then it goes straight to video. And even with that, it comes out on video like a week after Jurassic Park does. So obviously, like all of the attention is on Jurassic Park. They tried to do some things to promote it that were pretty interesting. Like they told video stores, if you order 3 or more copies of this movie, we'll send you a like sphere clock that has like the blades as the hands of the clock, so you would get like a little Phantasm tchotchke, which
oh my gosh,
that has to be out there, right?
I have to find one.
We have to maybe
one.
spend some time like Googling that or trying to eBay it, because those have to be out there. Like I had a client once give me, his brother-in-law was like worked on Hellraiser 2, and he brought back a bunch of the lament cubes that they used on that movie. So he gave me one of those at one point, and it was just like 6 pieces of plastic. It was not, you couldn't move it or operate it.
Well, that's good.
Yeah,
Mike, you're not
that is true. Yes. But it was one of the coolest kind of like horror things that I'd ever received. Sadly, it didn't survive our move. I have no idea where it ended. So someone out there is like sucked into the Cenobite world. But yeah, I would love a little tchotchke, like a Phantasm clock. That would be super neat.
Absolutely.
All right. So it's, Angus Scrimm tries to promote it, like he does some TV work and appearances, but basically it kind of comes and goes. And I think everyone feels a bit discouraged by that, although they knew, like, all right, we're definitely going to have to do more of these because, like, we can't end on this note. So, we'll talk about that next time we meet with Phantasm IV Oblivion. But right now, we're here to discuss Phantasm III, Lord of the Dead. And I guess the first thing I'll ask, and I'll leave it to you both because I've just kind of blathered on, what do we think, again, of, like, picking up immediately where the last one left off, and it also continuing to be awkward because of recasting. So you have to kind of splice in new awkwardly staged footage with what happened in the previous movie.
It's part of the charm to me because it's so bold that they do that, and because it's so, like, they're daring us to question it. They're like, yeah, we did this again. What are you going to do about it? Get on board or don't. And I love that about it because it's the commitment to the actors and the story and telling a particular kind of story. And it's not letting pesky details like humans aging get in your way. And what is Phantasm about if not escaping a flesh prison? So I feel like it works and I don't mind it at all. It's ridiculous and I love it.
Yeah, I was so surprised that they decided to pull that card again, but I was not mad at it. It's like even more ballsy to me this time because there's like not even a time gap. Like at least the first one, it's like, okay, this happens, but then obviously some time goes by. And here it's like, nope, we're just right back in it. And I thought that they did a pretty good job about like marrying the two parts and, cutting around, what's his face's actual face. You see his hair a little bit and you see her, you see the love interest there a little bit, but then they work in Baldwin and just it's off to the races. So I was actually, pretty impressed with how they did that. And yeah, I was excited to just know that it's like, all right, we're just going on the road again. Here we go.
Yeah, it's definitely, you could have just had it with like Reggie getting tossed out of the car and then it drives off. But nope, like we're going back to the old mausoleum. We're going to show like, hey, those really cool effects. Like they want you to jump right in and get kind of like grossed out in the best possible way when you get like the melting, the eyeballs exploding in Phantasm 2. I don't know if we even mentioned that last time. Is such a cool effect, so you kind of know what you're in for right away. And then what I noticed, like Liz from part 2, like the love interest, like she gets the Newt from Aliens 3 treatment here. And I don't remember if Aliens 3 is before or after this movie, but I just picture like a young David Fincher watching Phantasm 3 at home and being like, wait a minute, I have an idea how to get around that pesky Newt corundum. At this point, like, we're just going to kill her off in the first 2 minutes. So
it also doesn't overstay its welcome. Like, I appreciate that. Like, they give you just enough information to, like, all right, this is where we are. This is the world. Oh, killed her off. All right, cool, awesome. No more of her. It's not like, Silent Night, Deadly Night 2, where it's, like, all just footage from the previous films.
You don't have to watch the first one, actually.
Yeah, so I did really appreciate that they were just kind of, I don't know, very efficient about that decision.
Good point. What is the tall man's plan? That was like the first note I had here. He shows up, sees it, Reggie's got a grenade, and it's like, well, you hang on to Michael for a little bit for me. I don't quite understand what his whole scheme is in part 3, and I don't know if that's going to carry forward. Because in part 1, he's after Michael because Michael just knows what he's doing. Like, Michael's a nosy kid that just stumbles on like something he's not supposed to. So the tall man is treating him kind of like a loose end that needs to be tied up. Here, by part 3, it seems to be that like Michael is part of some grander design. And I'm not quite sure what that is. So Ariel, you've seen all of these. Without spoiling too much for us, could you give us your own interpretation of what you think is going on here?
Sure. I'll keep it contained to what we do learn in 3. Mm-hmm. Pay attention to the way the tall man separates the brains from the bodies. Mm. So something we learn in part 3, the lore expands greatly in this movie in between all of the nonsense, and I just love that. I also watched it this morning, so I'm also still on a high with it.
I think we all did. I think we all just rewatched it before.
It's great breakfast horror. Yeah. So, we know he shrinks down the bodies and sends them off to wherever he sends them. I think Reggie says it really eloquently. He's like, he's from somewhere and he sends the bodies to wherever. And it's like, okay, we got it.
Well put.
But he takes the brains out and he puts the brains in his cranial spheres that he sends after people. So watching 3, you might think, he's really decided he wants Mike's brain.
He's got a high, midichlorian count, right? Mm-hmm. Isn't that... I feel like in the second one, they were kind of alluding to, he has this power, this shining power, right? And there's something special about his brain. And so I just kind of took it as Mike, whether he knows it or not, is capable of something a little bit different. And the tall man recognizes that. I do agree. Don't get that in the first one at all. Mm-hmm. It seems much more just oh, this pesky kid is, screwing up my game here. But I just kind of, looked at it like that. So I'm kind of excited. Oh, the brain ball. I freaked out when I saw that. I was like, yes, we're getting some weird, gnarly tech involved and embracing that kind of 90s technology thing. This is Phantasm does hackers or something. I don't know. It was really amusing. And I love that development.
I seem to notice a lot of Star Wars sounds whenever the spheres are involved. It sounded like they were directly lifting the sounds of the lightsabers being ignited, and then that weird kind of ball from the first movie, the training ball for Jedis. It seemed like they were using those blaster sounds. I'm I wonder if Coscarelli and Lucas tight in any way? Are they both of them coming from the indie filming background? Is Lucas a Phantasm fan, or a fan, as you were?
Yeah. And the ball with the eye, it reminded me of when Luke goes to Jabba's palace and opens a thing that. That reminded me of that character.
Well, let's discuss the balls now. Let's discuss the spheres now, because I had that in my notes for later on. I think we're here. The spheres in this movie are the star of the show. At this point, it's okay, the big reason the audience is coming is because those are such a cool design and such a cool kind of creature in and of itself. They almost do have a mind. Well, they do. They have a mind of their own, as we see in this movie. They literally do have a mind of their own. There are like Michael says to Timmy, there are thousands of them in this movie, and not quite thousands what we see, but we get the idea. Is it too much, or are we pretty excited to have more balls all the time?
I love it. Give me a whole pit of them, a whole ball pit. I thought it was brilliant, and it made me excited because I did feel very kind of the first two gave me blue balls a little bit in the terms of it's not kind of filling in the purpose of these or what they are or how they work. And to me, it was okay, this makes sense. This is what he's doing with the bodies. This is why he's doing with the bodies. He's not just kind of I don't know. I thought in the first one, I think I mentioned that he was just kind of the manager. Mm-hmm. I didn't think that he had a more substantial role. And it kind of became more clear with this one that oh no, he is kind of the mad scientist making this happen. He might not be alone in this role, but he does take more of a leadership role in what he's doing with these brains and things. And it makes sense then why these balls act that way, and kind of as they expand upon the different balls and what they're capable of and the different I don't know, tricks that we see them do here and in the last one, I guess. It makes sense to me. And so I was happy to see that development. And I like I don't know.
Yeah.
I like the idea of just having a bunch, like when they show the ceiling and there's just a bunch of them up there. I'm like, oh, that's cool.
Because
kind of like a hive.
Yeah.
Kind of weird. I love it.
Here they do pretty much do whatever the audience needs them to do at the time, or whatever the movie needs it to do at the time. Like, it can spy on people. It has an eye in it. It's like a weapon. It has everything. So it's gone from being like a weapon to like whatever we need at this moment. Like, we'll just use the sphere. And the sphere will do that for us, which is kind of funny. I mean, it's definitely like, hey, we might as well.
He even uses it as like a crystal ball, you know, like at the beginning, and like a few different scenes, you know, or like Sauron or something, like it's like the eye, you know, he's like looking and watching. I was just, it's delightful to see it used in that way. And I think it solves a lot of problems for the writers. Like, I don't know, use the ball. What if they did this? All right, sure, why not? I would love to talk about like Jodie in the ball.
Okay.
Yeah.
Let's do that.
I'm just curious, like, were you guys surprised by that? Because I was shocked. I was like, oh my God, Jodie's back. And then, like, seeing him related to the ball, I thought was really interesting. And I loved how it was like a magic 8-ball. They're like, which way should we go? Like, oh, this looks like the right direction. Great. All signs point to right.
He's an early version of GPS.
Yeah. I was surprised to see Jodie, because the first time I watched these movies, I didn't read anything about them, so I didn't know the actor was coming back. And I also wasn't ever sure if we should trust him, because there's been so many times in the first two movies where a character who seems friendly ends up being just sort of like like a henchman. Mm-hmm. And so Jodie is, when he first appears to Reggie, and he's like, I need you to get behind what I'm saying, I kind of thought maybe he was like an evil apparition. But he's not. Like, he's just Jodie the whole time, and it seems like he's using whatever sort of like ghost energy to project himself out there, and then he sort of like collapses back into the sphere until he has enough energy to come out again. I do think it's interesting that his body continued to age after he died, but I think that's just not enough movie magic, maybe. But it's so interesting the way, like, there's a scene where Michael puts Jodie's sphere on his head and sort of like jacks into the Matrix, where he and Jodie are like talking about what to do next and how, like, ways to get to the tall man. I was just kind of like, Jodie, where have you been? If you could do this, where were you in the last movie? But it's great.
And Jodie would respond, well, you weren't really yourself in the last movie, so...
Yes.
You're distracted by the girl.
Rachel, you had mentioned with like the tall man, we kind of get a better idea of who he is and what he's doing. I almost wonder, like, is the tall man one creature? Because we see at the very beginning of this movie, when it flashes back to the end of the second one, we get this new footage that's inserted of like the tall man crawling out of like the two cylinders that like are the gateway between our world and his. And it's a new body that, you know, completely perfect condition. He just walks over like the husk of the old one. Like, so is it just like one tall man, or is there like a whole slug of them on an assembly line somewhere, and one dies, like the next one comes?
I kind of looked at it like, you know, I mean, he says somewhere towards the end, he says, you have lived in this flesh construct long enough. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of interpreted it as, you know, the body is just a device. Like, he transcends a physical presence. Like, his body, you know, when they cut off his hands, right, they kind of regrow into these like crazy Evil Dead characters. Mm-hmm. And so to me, the body is just a mechanism that he uses, and that's just kind of the shape that he uses. Mm-hmm. And, you know, he just, if that gets destroyed, his energy goes back through the Stargate, and then he, you know, respawns at his home base and crawls back through. So I kind of just looked at it as like, oh, okay, he's not really a man. He is something, and like, he's something else, and this body is just a physical structure. But that's not enough to destroy him. It just kind of temporarily disables him for a second. So.
Seems like a pretty unfair advantage.
Oh yeah, I mean, Tallman doesn't play by the rules.
He makes his own rules.
Exactly.
And now it feels like we have like 3 different classes of minions. So you have like the Jawas from the first 2 movies, like the little persons with the ugly faces, and those are just the compressed corpses of like the bodies he steals, basically. Then you have the brain spheres, which are introduced here, like so the persons that are maybe on a higher plane that he might see. I guess to your point, Rachel, what you said is like see potential in them, like there's some sort of power here and we can tap into it. Where do it is almost deadites in this movie. And Coscarelli and Sam Raimi are friends. Like Raimi actually made a lot of recommendations for crew on Phantasm 2, and you get the Easter egg later on. I think it's the bag that's filled up, and it has like Sam Raimi's name on it, like all the when all the stuff is drained out of it. What the hell are these things? Are they zombies? Are they deadites? Like, how would we classify like the nurse and then like the 3 Stooges we meet later on?
These characters blew my mind. Number one, like they look like they were from like Las Vegas. It's like, wait, they're like dressed like his necklace with like the gold dollar sign. I was like, what is this? Like, this is ridiculous. And she looks like she's like out of Showgirls, and they're just like raiding these towns. Like, what is that? I don't understand what this group is, but I loved it.
Very 90s. It is the early 90s.
But yeah, they call them zombies, or at least Rocky calls them zombies a few times. But they have more personality, which is interesting. So they're just kind of like, they're more like deadites, I guess, in that they're a little bit, wittier and have a little bit more of their personality. But I'm not exactly sure what their purpose is other than to just be amusing.
They're the muscle. Right?
Yeah.
And they're pretty disposable. Like if you need to get rid of something, if you're like, well, we don't mind breaking a few eggs to make some omelets here, you can get rid of these people pretty easy. They're cannon fodder.
They kind of seem like a quick fix version of the Jawas. Like, we don't have time to make you into the minions that I usually use. We're just going to real quick reanimate your corpse. Now go get them. And doesn't really matter if they die. Like, it kind of feels like a duct tape solution for the tall man. Yeah,
that's a good point. Also, there's like the Henry Warden, like My Bloody Valentine, like gravedigger people that pop up. They were in the last one too, but they also popped up here, just like for a second though. And also, it's like, okay, did they just dig up bodies and drive the hearses? I'm not exactly sure where they were there for a second and then they disappeared. So I'm not. I guess their sole role is to dig up graves. I don't know.
So let's talk a little bit about the characters of this movie. And what I found interesting is there are a lot of parallels to the first movie. Like this third one, in a lot of ways, acts as like a nice kind of mirror to the first. Like to your point, Ariel, you had said how they move away from like the action setting of the second movie and they allow it to have that more kind of ethereal, dreamlike feel to it. And I think a lot of that is reflected in the characters we see. First, what do we think of like, Reggie Bannister in the second movie? He's established as the co-lead. He's established as kind of like a man of action. He's kind of like your Ash in the second movie. And I think you see that continue in this movie where he is a bit more of a quipster. Like I have my note here, like Reggie, action hero, child protector, quipster, and sex pest is basically how I would describe him. What do we think of him as fully being established as the lead? This is very much Bannister's movie.
Thank God they were able to have him in all these movies. Like I mean, the franchise is resting on his involvement at this point. Like, he's the one through line. I mean, Angus Scrimm, too, obviously. But as far as the kind of energetic, affable character that we care about, it's Reggie. And I do think that he's very consistent in what he's given his character throughout. So it's just, it feels right. It feels great. I'm obsessed with his continuously wearing long sleeve shirts under his flannel shirts. Even in his like sex fantasies, he has on the layered shirts and just leaves those on, which I just, he's just so endearing.
Yeah.
And mildly capable.
Yeah. Well, he's just like sort of, I think I said this in the first episode, like we should all be so lucky to have a friend like Reggie. Like he'll just have your back. Yeah, I agree, Rachel. I think he's just exactly who he is, and we've come to know and love it. And I know we're not talking about Rocky yet, but when we do, I think Rocky is the perfect balance for Reggie in this movie, and we really need her. Otherwise, Reggie could feel like too much. But Rocky can be a little bit of an audience surrogate to be like, settle down right now. And Reggie's kind of like, okay. And so we all go on with it. But I think part of the reason Reggie works so well, just being like kind of a quipster and a pest, is because Rocky's there like, shut up and settle down.
Yeah. Well, it feels too like Bannister had grown as a performer between part 2 and part 3. Like it just, you can physically see him getting more comfortable with the role and with his own performance as each movie goes on. Like one of the comic scenes of this movie is when they're at the motel and Rocky like leans into the car window and it's like, oh, Tim, do you want to come into the hotel? Like, you can stay in our room. And Bannister's just behind her giving like the Heisman sign, like, nope, you don't want to do this. Like, just like, don't cock block me, kid, here, just. And it's like a really funny scene. And I don't know if he would have been like the Reggie of part 1 probably couldn't have pulled that off. Like, I just keep thinking of the guy that runs in that is like saying things like, we're hot as love, just like, don't know if he could have pulled that off. So it is good, that these movies like really belong to him. And I think in part of that, we'll move on to talk about Michael. Part of that reason is, at this stage, like Michael Baldwin, he's not really an actor. Like this is his second role in anything. And it had been like a solid 15 years between performances. So Michael in this movie, although it's great to have Michael Baldwin back, like he's given a lot less to do than like James LeGros was in the second one. He's more of like a plot bauble. Like he is the princess that needs to be rescued from the big bad. Like you almost see like different act breaks. You almost want to see a title card come up that says, but the princess is not in this castle. And then they have to move on to the next set piece. But I think we all like the return of Baldwin to the role, right? What do we think?
I think it's nice seeing him. I was happy to see him. I thought he did well. It's funny that you said princess. I didn't think about that. Yeah, because when he's like at the mausoleum, he's like Leia trapped in like the thing, and they like break him out, and Reggie's like Luke, and like, I'm here to rescue you. Like, I didn't even think about that. That's funny.
Yeah, it's like we get him back. We have this scene at the beginning where we're like, yay, Mike's back. And then he's like gone again. And we're like, dang it. And then Reggie gets another little boy to travel with him. So it's like we keep sort of having Mike and then not having Mike and then having a Mike replacement. But I'm not sure why it is. Maybe something about the performance, or maybe I don't know, but I feel super connected to Michael Baldwin's Michael character. And so when he's on screen, I'm just like, my heart goes out to you. I want you to get through this. I know you love your brother. Like, I still sort of think of him as the little kid from the first one because we haven't really seen him do much else other than that. So I'm kind of like protective of him. So yeah, I like having him back.
I think a lot of that goodwill does come from the first movie because he is exceptional in that movie, given what it is. Like, he's a pretty easy character to root for. It's kind of awesome seeing this like 13-year-old kid like hotwire cars and like break into, like, he's having an adventure is like the way I would put that. Like, and as a kid, we all want to have adventures, and to see that on screen is pretty neat. Doesn't hurt that he kind of looks like the kid from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. So kind of like pretty easy to root for, Charlie from that movie.
That's right.
So it's kind of fun seeing him back. He just, I think, to Coscarelli's like credit as a director, he doesn't like overwhelm Baldwin with like, I'm going to give you too much to do, a lot of which like he may not have been able to do yet as a performer. And I don't know, like I'll watch part 4 and 5 and maybe with like time like he'll have grown and he'll have more to do. Like Ariel, you could speak to that when we talk about Ravager in a couple weeks. And I think he teaches acting now. I think like that's one of his like current jobs. He's like an actual like acting coach. So he's gone on to like do other things. But here I think it's pretty smart to bring him back. It's going to make the fans happy. It's going to get some press. But Coscarelli's like smart enough to know like, okay, but I need to put things in like Reggie's hands if I really want to kind of have things kind of carry over here. And then Rachel, I see you going through your notes. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
I just think, I agree that it was smart not to use him too much for multiple reasons. I think it makes sense, because, Baldwin wasn't necessarily a pro at this point. And then also just thinking about his character in the first one and the second one, what I like is that we kind of, we feel that sensitivity about Michael in this one. The second one, it was a little bit more, bombastic, like his grief wasn't necessarily as upfront. And here, I do think you kind of feel the past. Like we think about what Michael's been through, and in both of those earlier films. So I do appreciate that they didn't make him, like a huge action star or like, just something that would be out of character. Like everything he does in this feels true to the Michael that we know and to everything that Michael's gone through. And so it makes sense that, and once Jody gets introduced, clearly he's going to be like, I have to like find out like you're back. Okay. Like what's going on? Like he's clearly going to be a little bit more emotional, knowing that his brother is out there. So seeing him kind of take more of like an internal, at one point, meditative, that kind of approach to tackling this, like it feels right. And so I appreciate that they were a bit sensitive with this character. Not just the actor, but also this character that they've given us. So that's just, I don't know. I think that having Don Coscarelli involved at every stage in these movies, like these are why these films are so, they feel that way. Like you think about the Chucky series too, like we talk about like Mancini's involvement. It's like because these people, these writers, these directors, they know these characters. And so they give them roles that make sense and are honoring those characters. And this is just another example of what can happen when that situation allows for that. It's great.
Yeah, it's very much Coscarelli, one person's vision from movie to movie. And although he might not have a set in stone plan on where each movie is going to go, like it doesn't, Phantasm II, it doesn't feel like that springs from like an immediate idea from the end of the first Phantasm. And obviously we were robbed of like having a monkey companion in part 3.
Robbed.
Right. So even though we might not have a concrete, this is like part A to part B, to your point, like when you have one person who is creating these characters whole cloth and is imagining their backstories, you get something that is like, it just makes, even if it's not perfect, it can make more sense than if you brought in, like, you watch the Elm Street movies, and as much as I love those movies, it's probably my favorite series overall. It oscillates wildly from movie to movie, even when you have returning characters, like what the tone it's going to strike is going to be. I want to ask too, like you both mentioned Jody's return and having him and Michael reunite and having that be kind of one of the emotional kind of cores of the piece. Feels like we get robbed of it pretty quickly though, right? Like they have a brief like moment to reunite, like all three of them are together again. And then like a moment later, Reggie is like out conscious on his back, Michael is gone, and Jody is trapped back in the sphere again, just kind of tagging along. Like, feels like we do get robbed of that pretty quickly.
There's one scene, I think, where they're kind of in like Reggie's mind, and Reggie, Jody, Michael, and the tall man are all there, and it's like the A-Team coming together, or the Avengers or something, where you're like, after 15 years, all these characters are in one place again, and then they go their separate ways. And I do think that adds to the emotional stakes. Like, we can't really have Jody back. He's dead. And it's hard for him to appear and speak, and so he has to use it sparingly. I think it could be kind of a cheat if they just had unlimited access to Jody in the third movie. So it does feel a little bit like robbed, but I'm also like, I think that makes sense.
Okay.
I do think it's smart, yeah, because if it was that easy to come and go, like, why are all these you think about all the other people that the tall man has, trapped in their little tiny brains in these balls. And so it's like, why don't they just, I don't know, you would think there would be some sort of like coup of some sort if they were all able to kind of manifest in that way or think that way, or I don't know, maybe they would zoom off and warm the next town. Also, side note, I didn't really think about it, but until they saw the map, and I saw, because I live in Boise, and when it said Boise, I was like, oh shit, I'm in tall man territory, I better watch it. So like, I would appreciate it if like one of these balls like came and like warned us, that if like he's coming down the coast and like he's coming down the highway, like you better watch out.
You may want to pack a bag and move.
Yeah, so maybe there's something about the presence of Reggie and Michael being so close, that's somehow, I would like to think, like strengthening Jody and makes him able to kind of manifest temporarily as this. But yeah, if it was too easy, it would open up a lot of plot holes that wouldn't necessarily make sense, I think, for the bigger picture.
Okay. So let's move on to Rocky. I think there's two very welcome additions to this movie. There's Rocky, played by Gloria Lynn Henry, and she talks about like her experience at getting the role and how she'd been auditioning for a number of things, not really getting them, and actually filing for like unemployment on the day she actually got the call that she was going to get the part. She was like considering like, maybe Hollywood's not for me. So she talked about her audition and like walking in and being like one of the only women there with like a shorter haircut and having that more kind of athletic look to her. And she's like, I'm going to get this role. Like, she felt really confident. She's pretty great. Like, she looks a lot like Blade. Like, that was the thing when I'm watching this movie. Like, you see Rocky in this movie, and she could be like Blade's twin sister, basically. They're both kind of rocking like the black spandex leather look. They both have the shades. Like, she obviously has like a flat top look to her. I mean, she's pretty awesome, total badass character, and I do like that it would have been very awkward if there was a real romance between her and Reggie. And like, Ari, I see you making a face like, yeah, like, not that Reggie is not worthy of love and affection.
No,
but
not at all. But it wouldn't make sense at all for Rocky to sleep with him.
No.
Like, don't get me wrong, like, Reggie is like the dad hero of my dreams. No problem there. But like, Rocky is she's a little bit of a fish out of water, and she even points that out at one point when they're starting to get together, and Reggie and Tim are like, why don't you come with us? We can all fight the tall man together. She was like, imagine the three of us trying to do that. And I appreciate her so much because she stays really true to herself throughout, which is not something the love interest in the previous movie did. Like, she was just a plot device, Liz. But Rocky's like, I'm not here to be the love interest. I'm here because we have a job to do. She, Reggie basically sexually harasses her. It was a different time, I guess.
It's meant to be played as charming.
Right, but it's just kind of gross.
Yes.
But she's like, if you keep coming on to me, I'm going to tie you to this bed and leave you here and, like, go to sleep. And then at the end of the movie, she gets away. She's like, I'm not doing this anymore. I didn't mean to start doing this in the first place. Like, her friend dies. Like, when we first meet Rocky, she is, you know, in a mausoleum with her friend who dies by one of the cranial spheres. So, like, Rocky gets a little bit of revenge, ends up protecting a child, helping to save Mike, and then she's like, I'm not going to keep doing this. And she drives away. And I'm just like, Rocky is my hero. I want to be just like her, because she's just like so true to herself, and she doesn't let Reggie take advantage of her, and she doesn't get herself killed. I just love her so much.
Yeah, my notes just say, I love Rocky. Fucking nunchucks. Like, she is so badass and confident, and I think that's part of her hesitation to join them, is that she knows, like, I'm the most capable one here. Like, I'm going to be put in this role of being the one that actually is able to fight. She mentions that she was in the military at one point. Like, she's trained. And so, like, what, motivation does she have to take on this kid and this guy that, like, won't, stop trying to get his hands all over her? Like, what is, why is she going to put her life on the line to protect these two? And I think that you're right. At first, yeah, she feels a sense of duty, a sense of revenge, but then after a while she's like, all right, like, I'm good. I know when to cut and run, and now seems like a good time, so I'm going to show myself the door. Goodbye. Good luck. And I just love how, yeah, she's funny, she's confident, she looks badass. She gives me also like Grace Joan vibes. Yes. Just everything about her just exudes just awesome, badass, energy. And yes. I am here for it. And I'm glad to see a female character presented in this way in this franchise, because so far every single female character has been somehow sexualized, and she's still sexualized, but doesn't, there's no acting on that.
And she has agency.
Yeah, she has agency. She is not interested in that. Like, she's like, sorry, dude, give it up. And so even though other folks around her are trying to put her in that position, she's not having it. And so I just really appreciate having a character like that who also stands in for kind of the capable action hero of this. Like, I would love to see what happens to her after this. Like, where is Rocky? Like, I want to go see what she does, because whatever she's going to do, it's going to be awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point about her, like, being sexualized and having her own agency, like, Reggie doesn't give it up. Like, even after that first night where she literally handcuffs him to a bed and rolls over and goes to sleep, like, the next day when she's like, oh, it's a little bit cold out here, he's like, well, one way to get heat is, like, both sleep in the same sleeping bag. It's like, oh, dear Reggie, and there's a version of this movie where, like, she eventually gives into his quote-unquote charms, and they end up together somehow. And I do love that they don't. And, like, once the job is done, like, to your points, she's like, all right, don't want to be a mom to this weird 12-year-old kid who might murder me if I, like, make him eat his vegetables, and don't want to be a partner to a guy who could be my grandpa. Like, I'm out. I'm going to drive away here. But she also is, like, when the job is going on, like, she's loyal. Like, when, Reggie's in a tough spot, she's like, get your hands off my man, and is more than capable of taking care of herself. Like, a really welcome addition to the series. And I know she pops back up again in part 5. I just don't know how yet. Sick. So, yeah.
I'm here for it.
Pretty
Can't
cool
wait.
Character. But let's move on to our other new character. Yeah, we have a little munchkin joining us this time, and Tim, played by Kevin Connors. He talks about, like, auditioning for this and, like, going to, like, 3 auditions a week, and, like, how it was very, like, physically demanding. Like, they would have him to do a lot of athletic stuff, knowing that was going to be kind of the role of this kid. I see Tim as a character where, like, Coscarelli watches Home Alone and thinks, like, what if Kevin McAllister actually straight up murders the wet bandits in Home Alone? Because that is very much this kid. Like, it's actually, like, on rewatch, I'm like, this is kind of terrifying. Like, this kid is totally dead behind the eyes. And
Yes.
he has seen some shit. Like, he has seen his dad murdered. He has seen his zombie dad murder his mother. He has seen his parents reanimate as zombies. He has seen his whole town basically get murdered by the tall guy. This kid's not coming back from this. Like, there's no therapy for this kid. There's no, like, let's process your feelings or, like, draw me your emotions right now. Like, this kid is just dead behind the eyes, will straight up, like, what really got to me is when, and you don't see it on screen, but you see him aiming the gun at, like, the crook in the grave, and then it cuts away, and he just straight up puts a bullet in the dude's head. Like, 9-year-old kid, just, like, ain't no big deal. He's fucked up.
I like his knife clown home security system.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny.
It's just this scary clown scarecrow thing with a bunch of knives in it that flies down at the door. Like, not only are you going to get stabbed, but you're going to be terrified while it's happening because there's a clown flying at your face.
Yeah. He's great with an axe throw. Like, I mean, he just buries that thing. Like, that is a man with that. He would grow up to be Liam Neeson in Taken, basically. Like, he is a kid with a certain set of skills. And I like, he's not the precocious kid. Like, he's definitely different from Mike in the first movie in that he's a straight up murderer. But it's hard to blame him. They even kind of dress him like Mike a little bit. Like, he has the jean jacket. Like, he's your definite stand-in here. And I do like that he's not impervious. Like, he's still pretty tiny. And if you're much bigger than him and get the drop on him, he's still going to wind up getting tied up or something. So, Rachel, what do you think of the addition of this little murderous preteen?
Oh, I mean, I found him to be really amusing. I think the actual, Kevin Connors does a pretty good job. Like, little kids can be really hit or miss, but I think that he does a good job at kind of selling that confidence and that capability. It's interesting to me that you never see that break because, like, he is a little kid and we don't ever really get a moment of him to, like, act like a little kid in a lot of ways, Like, he's never goofy, or there's never something where he's like, what's that mean? Or, like, you never see that at all, or see him, like, sad or having a moment where he's, like, actually scared. So I do think that I wish there would be a moment of that to kind of give him some childlike humanity. But I mean, yeah, the Home Alone stuff, the red sweatshirt with the, like, band across him, it's like, okay, clearly this is exactly what this is. And yeah, he's just an incredible shot. Yeah, and has no problem just, like, burying these people in his front yard. I don't know. I almost wish there was, like, a scene when I wanted the Las Vegas Wet Bandits to be like, I wanted him to call him, like, a little jerk. like I really was, because it's like, it's so obvious. It's like, why even, like, try to hide that's what you're doing? But that is something I love about these films. Like, Coscarelli makes no bones and no attempt to, like, hide his influences and to, like, it's like, clearly these are films that he loves, and I don't see it. It doesn't come off as, like, theft. I do feel like everything that he's doing is coming from a place of, like, love and appreciation with, like, a little wink. And so I thought it was fun. And it also gives Reggie, a little cohort and keeps him going and helps kind of, make up for Michael's weird, I don't know, journey that he's on as well. It injects some energy into the pace and the literal road trip that they're on.
Totally agree.
Yeah, it would have been great if he, like, tried on some aftershave or something. And then
something.
The one moment of levity he has is when he sneaks back into the CUDA and he kind of pops up the trunk as the driving away from, like, what seems like a makeshift orphanage that, like, just kind of popped up on the spot. Like, it's pretty fortunate that, Reggie happened to turn into the one place when he was looking for directions where, like, oh, by the way, I am also the town foster mom with, like, a dozen different kids here. So yeah, and I look at these characters, and when I look at like the end of this movie, it kind of ends the first trilogy, and it kind of sets it up so you have like a new story that can continue, say with like Michael in the role of the tall man or the an adversarial figure, Reggie and Tim being the new Jody and Michael team, and then Rocky or Jody in his orb form being the new Reggie, like the new sidekick character, or kind of like, third lead character coming back. Like at the end of this one, and I don't think it's going to go in this direction, but it looks very much like that is the story that you could be telling going forward with more of these movies. Because I think you have to look like Angus Scrimm is probably 70s at this point, like late 60s, early 70s, like getting up there, and even though he's the main villain of these movies, like the tall man's never in these movies for that much. Like he's probably in it more in this movie than he is even the first one. But even then, it's not a massive role. This doesn't feel like it's more than the others, but it still doesn't feel like a massive role.
He feels in this one like he feels more diabolical almost in this one, and less like physically imposing, which makes sense for obvious reasons. Like he's aging. I do think he talks more, like actually says more lines in this one, which kind of like takes away some of that Jason mystique a little bit. And yeah, he just kind of strikes me as more just like a mad scientist type rather than just a slasher kind of stand-in character. But yeah, I don't know. I didn't know how you guys felt about that. If you thought he was almost less scary in this, but more evil, but less scary. I don't know.
He does a lot of eyebrow acting in this one.
He does.
Which is fun. But it adds to the mad scientist vibe, and makes him seem a little bit off his rocker, but not like a stone-faced killer.
Yeah, somewhere Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson is looking at this performance going like, ooh, the eyebrow raise. I could do that.
Yes.
So all of it comes from Phantasm III. So I think the only other thing I really wanted to talk about was like the effects of the movie, because they are, even though like it is a lower budget affair and there's less money to work with, like the only effect that didn't work for me was seeing the face of the minion early in the movie. Like you see it and it looks very much like a static kind of rubbery monster mask, where in the second movie when you see them exposed, like they look like actual like living creatures. But other than that, the big thing here was like the orb being implanted inside of the skull, and the yellow pus really popped out. Like it just looks super gnarly. Like I think I made a note, like watching the hospital scene. I'm like, I wonder what that shit tastes like. Like when it gets into Reggie's
when
mouth.
it's in his mouth.
It's super gross. But like it looks great. Like Michael kind of like lifting up his hairline, and you see the orb like that is a really nasty effect.
Yeah. I will say this continuously surprised me, because I have got blinders on. I'm not reading anything. Like I'm not looking at Letterboxd reviews. Like I don't want to know where this is going, because it has continuously surprised me. And it's like, what is happening? This is blowing my mind. And I love that it feels like anything can happen, and yet that would be okay. So, because I did not see that coming when like the ball in his head, like just so gross. And I thought they executed pretty much, all of the effects like really well.
Yep. And it was very Evil Dead, as we've mentioned. And it felt like, they didn't overdo it at any point. Like every time I saw an effect, I was like, yes, I wanted exactly that right there. So they just did it really smartly, I think, in this one.
Even the spheres, like the movement of the spheres and just the way that they're flying about and the different spheres that we get. Like I know we've already talked about those, but I do appreciate like how much variety there was and the movement that they had. It did feel very, I don't know, it didn't feel cheesy to me.
Yeah.
Like I do feel like this movie actually holds up in a lot of this. Like, yeah, we don't get any like back tall men like coming out, like those kind of like really involved practical effects, but the ones that they did do, I think were all executed really well.
I think a lot of the sphere work is like remote control work this time too. So it's like someone operating them, like comparing that to like the first two movies where it's a lot of optical effects and a lot of times it is someone like literally throwing the sphere and then like showing it or doing it in reverse so that it looks like it's flying forward. So there is that kind of like I don't know, it looks great like in the first two movies, but there's maybe more of a smoothness here, and like the spheres can do more. They seem to like turn on a dime, and they are in more like, because the first couple movies sometimes you're just like, why doesn't someone just duck, because like they don't seem to handle like transitioning from a very specific height very well, where here they do. I think because of the remote nature, like they can do a bit more. What else do we have? Like, Rachel, I see you going through your notes there. I've got what I rented, so
I do think I like the score in this one better. I'm just going to say I was not really a big fan of the Phantasm II score, but I did like how here it feels, we get the same themes, the great old Phantasm themes that we've had, and I love that. But I do feel like they were adapted. You get some guitar elements, you get some orchestral elements. It feels a bit bolder and a bit more polished. And I'm just impressed. Like, I know this had a smaller budget, but I really went in thinking this was going to be like, a little bit garbagey. And it's fine. I love a good garbage film. Like, it's fun. Like, that doesn't necessarily, limit me or make me not want to watch it. I just kind of thought like, all right, where is this going to start looking like direct to TV or something? But I was impressed by it. There was a lot of different sets. There's some good lighting. The action sequences that did have, the effects, like I'm just really impressed by this. And and there's a gas station harbinger, and classic horror things, that I really loved.
That's the exact phrase I wrote down. I wrote down gas station harbinger. But we also get a second harbinger at the motel.
Yep.
I was like, this movie is just sick with harbingers. I loved it.
Just don't go down there, toxic spill or whatever. What did they say? Or it was like a toxic spill the first time, and then like the second time, what did they say? It was like anthrax or something. I can't remember what they said, but it was an anthrax, and it's just like, what is going on in Oregon over there? Like, I
kind of think that guy is rethinking every choice of opening like a motel right near the quote unquote anthrax spill site. Business is not exactly booming at this location.
Yeah.
I also really, really like the cotton candy pink hearse. And I think my only bucket list item is to have a pink hearse now. Okay. So, gotta work on that.
Well, you need to talk to Andrew from our part 2 episode.
Apparently, with his hayride.
His hayride hearse.
His first hayride.
He might know a guy that can get you connected.
Hey,
it is pretty funny that this trio just happened to have, like, that was their vehicle of choice, was like a pink hearse. And it's like, oh, that's convenient for the tall man. Interesting. All right.
I can't see the tall man driving a pink hearse, though. I can't. At the end of the day, that one did have, if he's going to sacrifice one of his many, many hearse vehicles, he's probably the kind of guy where, like, the pink one is going to go.
I mean, I don't know. Nothing would surprise me in this franchise. I guess we'll see.
It's the Phantasm and the Furious now. There's so many cars.
We need one. Yeah, with flames on it. Like, let's do it. Then they race with the CUDA and it
Vin
pops
Diesel
up
and the Reggie
hit the NAS. Yeah, I'm here for this crossover event. Let's do it.
I almost made a tasteless Paul Walker joke, but we will leave that be.
Too soon.
Too soon. We'll leave that be. What else do we have? Anything else?
I just wanted to mention my favorite line delivery in the whole movie is when Reggie first sees Jody and says, "Jody, what are you doing here? You're dead." But he doesn't say it like, "Oh my God, I'm seeing a ghost." He says it like, you're supposed to be at work.
Yep.
Or like, I thought you were elsewhere today. He's just like, what are you doing here? You're dead. Like, don't you remember you're dead? I cracked up. I was like, Reggie, of all the ways you could have delivered that line.
Yeah. Well, I think by this
so
point,
good.
like, Reggie has seen so many things that you would
That's
not expect
true.
seeing at this point that
That's true.
he, including his last girlfriend, peeling her own skin off her face to reveal like
Yeah.
a demon underneath. Like, by this point, like, Reggie has seen some shit. So
He's just kind of like, whatever.
Yeah.
Jody's here, I guess.
I guess, you know. When they meet in the dream later on, too, and it's like a
Oh my
super
God.
casual conversation. And like, at the end of the movie, when Jody's like, you know, you're going to have to trust me. Not everything is what it looks like. It's like, what? Can you explain that a little bit?
No.
No.
Figure it out.
I also will say the ending, like, it kind of bothered me in the second one how they used the same kind of like pull through the mirror, but the fact that they're like tripling down on that now when they pull him through the mirror, I'm like, all right, now
This
I've
is our
gone
thing.
from like, yeah, like I've gone from like being annoyed at that in the second one to
Yeah.
like, all right, I see what we're doing. Like,
Yeah.
I'm kind of obsessed with that.
Yeah, like, you know, Freddy makes his quips, Michael Myers does the head tilt, you know, and Phantasm does the we're going to pull a child through glass at the end of every movie. That's going to be our
it.
signature. I do like, I made a note that there's a lot that is happening in this movie. There's almost like too many things introduced, because at times you're like, wait, there are Deadite zombie nurses / minions / the tall man is introducing, you know, like he's creating brain orbs, like what? And also Jody's back. Oh, and we have like a ninja and a murdering child. Like all of these things are coming together. Yet the movie's a pretty tight, like 91 minutes, like 88 minutes with before credits. So nothing is like, I don't feel things are glossed over, but I don't feel like things are like stretched super thin either. And I wish more movies would do this. Like, hey, not everything needs to be 2 hours long. We don't need to do that. So
Yeah. It's a perfect sampler platter of like, here are all the things you could want in just the perfect amount.
Yep.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like if this was released in theaters and was just like Phantasm Lore of the Dead instead of Phantasm 3, like, especially with it coming out around Halloween, could have done, I'm not saying it would have set the world on fire, but like I could see people going to see this on Halloween. Like I think it would be a lot of fun. Like I think it deserved, and I think now we're on all of these like straight to video territory, but you know, it's still a step above your typical straight to video fare for this time period. So, well, all right. That is our episode on Phantasm 3. We'll be discussing its follow-up, Oblivion, next week, and then wrapping with Ravager. So, Ariel, I know you'll be back for Ravager, but in the meantime, where can our listeners see, read, or hear you?
Yeah. So you can follow me on Twitter at Ari_Hellraiser, and I'm also on Instagram and Letterboxd at the same handle. And all my writing and podcasting I'll post on my Twitter. And definitely check out ghoulsmagazine.com. It's a UK-based horror site where we review and celebrate horror through the female perspective. And there's a ton of free stuff on there, but there's also, if you want to pay for a membership, there's a ton of member-only content like interviews and editorials and podcast episodes that you can go back and listen to. Right now, I'm really recommending an article about the best severed penises in horror, because that got us a really angry email from some dude this week that we all loved and celebrated. So go check out our article on the best severed penises in horror and enjoy that at Ghouls Magazine.
For free, or is that behind the paywall?
That's a free one.
Excellent. So you get severed penises are free. Severed.
Yep.
Okay.
And for everyone to enjoy.
Did Terrifier 2 make the cut?
It came out before Terrifier 2, so we might have to do a follow-up article and just really piss off this dude.
I don't think guys realize when they send an email like that, like, I can. Is the email posted anywhere? Like, do you?
No.
Okay,
Yeah.
but I can only imagine the tone and content of it, and I don't think that like when people realize when they send that kind of email, like it's not going to change minds. It's going to be mocked behind the scenes. Like it's going to be ceaselessly mocked and used as a thing to bring the writers joy. So
yes,
excellent. Well, I will definitely look up that article because hey, we might have to do some research for future episodes. So Rachel, how about yourself? Where can our listeners find you? Where are you hanging your hat right now?
Yeah, so you can find me on Twitter at Vinyl Girl, GRRRL, and I'm on Instagram at The Vinyl Girl. Also on Letterboxd, been hanging out there, doing my best to make, reviews of everything. Not, super long, thoughtful reviews, just dorky thoughts on films. So yeah, if you want to follow me there, it's a lot of fun. You can follow my Phantasm journey. And I'll be on an upcoming episode of The Losers Club. We're covering The Colorado Kid, which I just love. I love the hard case crime books, so that'll be really fun. And our dear friend Jen Adams will also be on that episode as well.
Excellent. Well, listeners, you can find us at Pod and Pendulum over on Twitter. You can go to our website, podandthependulum.com, where all of our back episodes and descriptions are there, like really nice kind of layout for there. We're using Podpage for that, and that's a super easy way to put a show page together. So podandthependulum.com. You could also leave us reviews there that'll get posted to Apple, which is huge for us. We've gotten some nice reviews lately, which is really helpful. A very easy way to support our show is to give us a 5-star rating and review us with a few kind words. It helps new listeners find us. It just kind of boosts our profile a bit. So we do appreciate when you take a moment and do that. You can find my other show, Psychoanalysis, a horror therapy podcast, everywhere you get shows. Rachel just filled in for Jen on our recent episode on The Harbinger. So the third time we're using that phrase. Now, tonight, we did the Andy Mittens 2022 movie, The Harbinger, in our series looking back at the mental effects of COVID. And that was, honestly, one of our best episodes. Like, it was a really good listen. I would strongly recommend you go back and check that out. You can find me at Mike_Snoonian on Twitter and Instagram. You can find me on Hive at Mike Chump Change. I keep feeling like I'm going to post there more and more. I just haven't made that full transition yet. You can also follow my Letterboxd over on Letterboxd at Mike Chump Change, where similar thing, like I write like one paragraph reviews that tend to be kind of pithy. Like my review of Vertigo was the best remake of Faith No More's Last Cup of Sorrow video that you'll ever see. That was my note on Vertigo. So that's the kind of hard-hitting analysis that you'll find over there. And my goal this year is to track at the very least every 2023 horror movie I watch, just so I can come up with a year-end list a little bit easier and remember what came out when. But yeah, we will be back next week hopefully next week with our episode on Phantasm IV Oblivion. We'll wrap up our Phantasm coverage with Ravager, and then we have our series are planned out through August right now. So we're going to be covering Happy Death Day, Psycho, Jaws. We have the Purge movies. So we have Ari, I just saw your face. You drop me a note where you want to come in. So we have a lot of our franchises planned out through the middle of the year. We'll also be dropping episodes on Evil Dead Rise and Scream 6 when those come out, in order to kind of be completist on our coverage of those franchises. And I will never need an excuse to talk Evil Dead or Scream movies, folks. There's never an excuse. I'm debating, we haven't really discussed this yet on our show feed, where we kind of discuss what we're going to cover. Saw 10 comes out this year, and I don't know if I can get it to line up when Saw 10 comes out. I'm not sure what we would have to do to make that happen. But
just rework your whole schedule for Saw. That's worth it.
Is it? I've only watched the first 2 in Jigsaw. So
I've seen them all, baby.
Okay.
That's my favorite franchise.
All right, so we have some guests lined up for sure then. Rachel, you might as well just, between that and The Purge, or I guess you're just, Ariel, you're just part of the show at this point. Like, you've just joined the crew.
I just elbowed my way in.
That's fine.
Yeah.
Come on in.
I am all for that. I am all for that.
The water's fine.
So, yeah, at some point we're going to cover Saw, is what people have asked about it, because people hate me and want me to watch all of these movies. But no, we have it's like, shockingly, we have a lot of our year planned out. So that's what's going on right now. And thank you so much for listening. We'll be back soon with Phantasm 4. Take care, everybody.